So I've been asked to talk to you about entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship overall it has quite a risk tolerance type of a connotation to it. People think that you need to be very, very risk seeking in order to pursue any kind of entrepreneurial endeavors. They think you need to be able to take enormous risk and put everything on the line. I'm here to tell you that's not true. I'm here to tell you that a lot of you in the audience here today can also be entrepreneurs. It's actually not as complicated as it seems, and we'll walk through a few examples today. I'll share my personal story with you as well as some other stories that I personally found very inspiring. So with that, we'll get started. I'll share my personal story first. So my journey begins in Lahore, Pakistan. I grew up in a model town, so not too far from where we're standing here today or sitting here today. I grew up in a family of physicians. Both my parents are doctors. They're joining us here today as well. My father is actually on the faculty here, and that's how this ended up getting organized. But I didn't have a lot of entrepreneurial exposure growing up. It was mostly medicine, and my parents worked very hard to send me to HSN College on Long Road. At HSN, I studied mostly the broader subjects. I didn't know what I wanted to do back then. So I studied engineering, which basically means physics and chemistry and mathematics. Started my very early education there, had a lot of fun in the process. It was a very, very nice school, made some friends for a lifetime as well. And when it came time to apply for colleges, my father and I were joking about this recently, that we did not have a very structured approach to it. We honestly didn't know how to go about the college application process. I was the first one in my family to be going abroad for college. So we tried to get the counsel of our close friends and family to see where we should apply. And we came across a website called Business Week. So Business Week, they do this today as well, but they compile a list of rankings for the top undergraduate and graduate programs for business. And back then, Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia was selected as one of the top universities for undergrad. So I applied to all the top 10 and ended up getting accepted into Emory, and they offered a very good scholarship. College is very expensive in the United States, so that was a big factor as well. So I ended up going to Emory. At Emory, I studied finance and information systems. Not necessarily because I was very interested in finance, it was more so that finance had the most exit opportunities, which just means that it's easier to get a job if you had a finance degree back then. Doesn't necessarily hold true today, but that's how it was then. And given that I was coming from Pakistan, my parents put everything on the line to send me to Emory University as well. I wanted to make sure I could at least get a job when I graduated. So I studied finance, and I was planning to become either a banker, investment banker, or a consultant, management consultant. And then during my senior year, so my fourth year of undergraduate studies, I came across the tech industry. Tech industry back then, and still is booming in the United States. So Google back then was a 50,000 person company. Now it employs over 200,000. So still relatively large, but it was growing quite a bit. Same thing with Facebook and the others. So I had a friend at Google, and he said, you have to apply here. You have to come see the campus and see what it's like. And I still remember, I had my interview at Google the same week I had my interview at McKinsey, which is one of the management consulting firms, and they could not be more different. At Google, they had free dining on campus, 3 meals a day. They had cars you could rent for free and bowling alleys on campus. For an 18-year-old, that was a dream come true. So Google was my dream job. And I still remember my interview with Google did not go incredibly well. It went okay at best, but at the end of my interview, I told the interviewer that just take a chance on me, and you won't regret it. And lucky for me, they did take a chance on me. I ended up getting accepted into Google, and I spent 4 years there in different marketing and advertising capacities. And at Google, like I said, it was my dream job. So I spent 4 years, but why did I leave? A lot of people often ask me that question, and the answer is quite simple. The answer is upward mobility. A lot of students here as well, as you get into your professional organizations, you'll notice that one of the key tenets to growth is upward mobility. You want to see yourself as a leader one day, and that's how you actually impart change. Change comes from the top. It's dictated from the top, and you want to be at the top. So I ended up getting a meeting scheduled with one of our senior vice presidents at Google. And the meeting I got scheduled just to ask him, what do I need to do to be in your shoes 10 years from today, 12 years from today, but how do I become a senior vice president at Google? And his answer was, Faizan, there is no path to becoming a senior vice president at Google. It doesn't exist. It's too good of an employer, so nobody ever leaves. And that means that there's no vacancies that open up. So that for me meant that Google was no longer a place I wanted to spend my career. If I could not see my growth there, I didn't want to spend more time there. And that's, as a sidebar, that's what I would encourage everybody else here in this room to do as well. If you see growth in your careers, keep investing in your careers. Otherwise, you should find other options. For me, the other option was entrepreneurship. And that was my first exposure to entrepreneurship. Back then, a lot of startups were coming into the space, and I realized that in order to take actual charge of your own career, you have to build your own career. And large organizations, you're basically at their mercy. You might get promoted, you might not. And I did get promoted a couple of times at Google, but in order to become the SVP that I wanted to become, there was no clear pathway. So I decided to leave. Before I left, I actually wanted to take a little bit of a discovery session of my own to figure out what should I build. And that's often a question that I get asked about too, and we'll talk about that later in the session. But my exposure was mostly in advertising technology. So back then I was working on the digital ads team. So for those of you that don't know exactly what that means, it's when Google shows advertising. So when you go and click into a website and you keep getting the ads over and over again until you finally buy the product, that's my team doing the annoying work for the marketing, but it's very effective work. So that was digital advertising. And I realized there was a huge gap that existed between the sophistication of digital ads, where everything is tracked. They know exactly who you are, what your age is, what your interests are. But traditional advertising, which is the billboards and everything that you also see over here, there's obviously no sophistication. So I wanted to build something that bridged the gap between the sophistication of digital ads and the lack of sophistication for traditional ads. So once again, digital ads being the Google, Facebook type advertising, traditional being billboards. I wasn't exactly sure how I wanted to do it, but that's what I wanted to work on. I left Google and I applied for my MBA program at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. And at Wharton, that's where my first dabble in entrepreneurship kind of started taking off. I met my co-founder on my second month on campus, and he basically wanted to build something that took advantage of the gig economy. Gig economy, for those who don't know, that's basically taking advantage of the independent contractors. Think like an Uber driver, food delivery drivers, people that aren't necessarily employed by one organization, but they leverage all these resources to be able to produce the end output by using that labor pool. So he wanted to do that. I wanted to build something in digital advertising. So we put both these concepts together, and we built Halo cards, which you see down over here. The whole concept for Halo was that what if you put a digital monitor on the roof of a car, and as a car drives around to different places, we show hyper-targeted video advertising on top. So you can take some of the sophistication of the digital ads and apply that to the lack of sophistication of the out-of-home ads. So you can think of it as like a smart digital billboard on wheels. And as the cars drive to different areas, so imagine a car driving by a Pizza Hut at 2 p.m. We'll show a lunch ad for Pizza Hut. Same car makes a left turn, starts driving by Honda. We'll start showing an ad for Honda Motors. The whole concept was advertising in out-of-home should be more sophisticated. So we started building that while we were on campus. And at campus, we leveraged every resource we possibly could. And that is one big takeaway I'm hoping you will take from this, is that campuses are fantastic places to launch businesses. You are very well positioned right now to be able to build businesses because you have incredible resources around you, whether it's people that are sitting around you right now, they're your fellow colleagues, or it's just the faculty you have, or the fact that you're a student and you can reach out to people and they will respond to you and respect you. A campus is a great place to create a company. We'll talk more about that later too. But anyways, we started Halo on campus. It ended up doing well. So we moved to New York City from Philadelphia. We hired some employees, we raised some funding, and we ended up scaling our business quite a bit. We were still a very small business. We were based in one house in Brooklyn. We used to sleep upstairs and work downstairs. It's very scrappy, very entrepreneurial, very cliche startup. And we had the perception of a large company. Because we worked pretty hard, we had a lot of monitors on the road. So people would see the monitor and say, that must be a large company doing interesting things. We were not a large company. We were a very small company with 5 employees back then. So Lyft is, for those who don't know, Lyft is Uber's largest competitor in the United States. It's a fairly large rideshare company. Lyft basically saw our units and they started getting interested. And one thing led to another, and we ended up selling the company to Lyft within 1 year of creating the company. And as part of that contract, my co-founder and I joined Lyft to start a team called Lyft Media. that we ran for the last 4 years. So that's my very quick path to entrepreneurship. We can chat a little bit more about that later, but I want to talk a little bit more about what it actually takes to be an entrepreneur. Over the past few years, I've had the privilege to be able to get exposed to a lot of fellow entrepreneurs, people that I personally respect, people whose companies I invested in. And the way I see it, there are three main traits of what makes an incredible entrepreneur. The first is risk appetite. I mentioned earlier, entrepreneurship is not incredibly risky, and I still stand by that statement. That being said, you do need a very base level of risk appetite. There will always be easier options out there. There will be cushier jobs out there. But you need to have just a basic level of risk appetite to be able to invest in yourself and carry forward. We'll talk about that soon too. The second is conviction. And by conviction, I mean unlimited, relentless conviction in yourself and what you're building. You need to have the confidence in yourself to be able to build a company. If you don't invest in yourself, you don't believe in yourself, nobody else will believe in you. And that applies no matter what you're doing in life. So you have to have unlimited, unwavering conviction in yourself. And the second is hard work. That one goes without saying. Just the fact that you're all sitting here today means you are used to working hard. You're at this great institution and hard work comes naturally. Instead of defining hard work for you, I'll just share a few examples of how we worked hard while we were building the company. So let's dissect these one by one. The first is risk appetite. So by a show of hands, how many people here are between the ages of 20 and 30? So just raise your hand if that's your age group. All right, keep your hand up, don't put it down. People in the ages of 30 and 40, also raise your hand. Okay, so a good percentage of the folks here. So that's the point I was trying to make too. You are in the best possible position to be able to train yourself to take risks. Now is the time to go out and invest in yourself and to be able to build something. Later in your life, as this chart shows, you have other distractions in life. Very good distractions, exciting distractions. You might get married, you might have kids, there might be other things that come in. And there's a time and place for that as well. But while you're young, your risk appetite should be a little bit higher than it would be compared to when you'll be older. So in terms of when you should take the risk, now's the time. And I talked about how entrepreneurship is not that risky to begin with. So let me tell you a little bit more about what that means there. There are ways to de-risk entrepreneurship. You do not need to put all your savings into one company and hope that it works, and if it fails, you're done. That is not how it works. The way you do it, you start with a basic MVP. MVP stands for minimum viable product. And that basically means that whatever you're building, you want the very basic version of that to be built first. And you use that to test the market. You see if your product has what we call product market fit. Does it belong in the market? Does it have a place in the market? Does it fit in the industry overall? That's what you want to do. So if you're building a car, you don't want to build the best possible car on the first day. You want to build a car with which you can take it to market and test what it is. We do the same thing. Our monitor wasn't the best highest resolution monitor, and I'll show you guys a photo of that later. It was a very bare bones black and white monitor with which you could test to see, do people actually want this? Are people willing to pay for what I'm building? That is a very important question you'll have to answer. And the only way to answer that is by testing it in the market. So you start with the basic MVP, don't put all your savings in. That's the first way to de-risk entrepreneurship. Second one is utilize college resources. And I mentioned this earlier too, and I can't stress this enough. You are in a fantastic place to be able to build a business. When I was building my business, we were on a college campus as well, and all of our early interns came from our school. Our first few customers were people that went to that school or were affiliated by that school. We reached out to alumni, and we were able to do that because we were students, and generally students get responses because people like to hear from students about what's happening on campus. Even if it's a new campus, people still respect the fact that it's students reaching out. And just the fact that you have incredible resources around you in terms of both the faculty and also the time available. Generally speaking, if you're working on a job, you kind of get consumed by it. It's very hard, very difficult to leave a job to be able to start your own company. If you already don't have a job, that makes it a lot easier. And I'm assuming most of the full-time students here do not already have a full-time job as well. If you do, that's very impressive. We should talk later. But most of you should not be doing that. If you're a full-time student, you should be able to commit to starting a company and at least testing things out. Third way to be used on entrepreneurship is by bringing in investors. I put in here in parentheses if needed, and that's another point I want to stress on today. When I was investing in companies, a lot of Pakistani companies also came through my portfolio, and I was looking at them and I considered investing in them. The only reason I invested in 0 of them is because they were overfunded. So you should only raise the amount of capital that you actually need to build your business. Your first few, the MVP you build, for example, you should just scrap together some savings and build it if you can. And then if it works, you go and get investors. And the investors, you raise the capital just the right amount you need. If you raise too much capital, you can talk about that later, but that basically creates more problems. You have to back into your valuation for the company. And that just means that if you're raising money and you're pretending you're worth 10 million, let's say your company is, you need to be able to prove at the next round that you have the revenues to be able to be that company. And if you can't, you don't get more investors. So you can bring in investors to de-risk entrepreneurship, do it only if needed, and only raise the amount that you absolutely need to raise. The last line I put here is a reminder. You can always go back to traditional roles. A job at Nestle here or a job at Procter & Gamble will always still be there. They will always still take you. If you go and dabble in entrepreneurship, they will respect the fact that you have the conviction to be able to build something of your own, and you at least tried it. Worst case scenario, if it fails, you go and get the normal job that you were going to take regardless. So can't stress that enough either, that it's not either or. Entrepreneurship is an and proposition. So you can do entrepreneurship, and if it doesn't work out, go get a job. No harm done. And his quote is, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. If you go in the market trying to find a solution for what you want to build, you're not going to find it. You need to be the one that finds a gap in the market, and you go and then build something that addresses that gap. And that is very prominent across all the entrepreneurs we see. So for my example, I saw the gap that existed between digital advertising and out-of-home. I saw that out-of-home advertising, like billboards, were not efficient. They were not targeting users, they were not tracking where users were going afterwards, and that's why they were not getting large investments that Google was getting. But if you can bridge the gap and make it more efficient, then people might actually come and spend. The other quote I have here is from Steve Jobs, who you all know is the founder of Apple, which is the most valuable company in the world. His quote is, people don't know what they want until you show it to them. That's why I never rely on market research. Our task is to read things that are not yet on the page. So if you think about what Apple did, it's completely revolutionary. Right? The phone without buttons did not exist. Apple basically created that. The computer in the form that Macintosh made did not exist. They created that. So throughout your journey, people will come and tell you no. They'll tell you what you're building doesn't make sense. This is fruitless. Why are you wasting your time on this? You have to be the one in a sea of all the no's. You're the one that says yes. What I'm building is going to work. What I'm building will absolutely work. And that is what conviction needs there. It needs to be unwavering conviction. The third point is on hard work. And I mentioned earlier, I'm not going to define hard work for you. You already know what hard work means. The fact that you're all sitting here means you know what hard work means. Instead, I'll share a few examples and some fun stories along the way, or at least I had fun looking through these old photos. So I'll go through these one by one and show you what's happening. First photo on the top left is our very first MVP, which as we know means minimum viable product. That was a very basic, very cheap monitor, pretty ugly monitor that we put on top of a car. That white shell you see there says Halo on it. That was our very first unit that we could get for the lowest possible cost to be able to test it. It didn't look very pretty on top of a car. We had to beg the driver to put it on top so we could run our tests. But it did the job, and the job was to figure out, do people actually react to this? Are people taking action based on what the monitor says? Are people looking at the monitor? Are advertisers willing to put money to be able to show their ads on this? And that's what it proved. So once again, MVP, don't overinvest in your first product. Your first product should be as simple as possible, just to drive home the point that it does work. The second photo I have with myself and two other gentlemen, that's myself and my co-founder with our first investor, Jonathan Beta, flew from Florida to come and invest in our company. And that was a very pivotal moment from us, because that basically meant that our monitor after that funding went from what you see on the left over there to the bottom over here, which is a much nicer, sleeping looking monitor, and that's all over many major cities in the United States now. So the investment that we raised, we deliberately raised just the right amount to be able to go to China and build a better monitor and order the first set of monitors for us. We didn't raise several $1 million. We don't need to raise that much. We raise basically small tranches, and that helps you down the road. Other reason it also helps you is that it helps keep entrepreneurs fairly scrappy. If you have too many resources, you don't tend to be scrappy. And as an entrepreneur, that's one of the best qualities you can have, is to be able to know how far $1 can go. And that's a very important lesson too. The third photo you see is myself and my co-founder at Y Combinator. This was fairly early for our entrepreneurial relationship, and we ended up not getting accepted into Y Combinator, but we learned a lot of lessons along the way. And that's just, it's a very obvious lesson here too, that failures come in the way. Sometimes you do get no's, and no's are correct. But the larger scheme of it is that you have to be telling yourself that this is a minor setback, we'll continue building, and we will get past this. The fourth one you see here is a photo showing a lot of monitors scattered around the building, the one right here. This was probably taken around 2 a.m., and this is when we got our shipment from China for all the monitors, and we had to install them on top of the rideshare and taxi car drivers the next morning. So we had to spend all night tagging these monitors. We had a lot of fun in the process. We built some games for ourselves and we just joke around, but it was hard work at the end of the day. The fourth one, Norman, was one of our first few drivers in New York City. This is his ID card that I found in my old photos when I was going through these. And obviously we owe a lot to him as well for having the trust and conviction in us to be able to let us put the monitor on top of his car. And the first one on the bottom over there is myself and my co-founders. That's the moment when we sold the company. That's when we got the news. You'll notice we're on the phone over there, we're all smiling. We got the news that they have accepted the offer. And we're basically standing outside an elevator. And this is just to go to show that you don't have that much time, but you make the best of the time that you have. So we're outside the elevator, we're celebrating here, and then we had to take the elevator down to the lobby to meet the Lyft team and to go to their offices to start working. So we didn't have a long month-long celebration portion. So you basically learn to cherish the small moments in entrepreneurship too, which is an important lesson. Then we have our old business card. Next to the business card, we have the home that I was referring to earlier. We used to call this home the Halo House. This was in Brooklyn, in New York City. The top floor, the 2 windows you see there, one of them was my bedroom, the other one was another person's bedroom. The bottom portion was the office. Going back to scrappiness, we had X number of dollars and wanted to make sure we stretched them as far as possible. That's another good lesson that we learned, that we don't need 2 separate spaces. And we save a lot of commuting time if the commute just means going downstairs. So that was the office where we built everything. It's still there in New York City. We go there off and on for old time's sake. But that's where we built the company. And the last one, as mentioned, is what the product looks like right now. It's one of the largest rideshare transportation companies in the country. We're proud of how it looks now. At least to us, it looks very good. So next, I want to share another example with you. I figured maybe my example is not as inspiring as I'd like to be. Maybe you think that the reason things worked out well was because I went to prestigious universities or because I happened to come from Google. So I wanted to share an example that I hope will be more relatable, an example that I personally find very inspiring, an example of my friend. So Waqas grew up in a village in Pakistan. He did not speak English. He did not have access to any real form of education. Did not have a computer. One day a computer pops up in his village and he starts teaching himself how to read English. He starts teaching himself how to use a computer. What Waqas did have was an incredible amount of passion for leather shoes. His family had some mochis in it as well, so they just knew the leather industry really well. And he was just like an average village boy. What Waqas did have was a lot of conviction in himself and in what he wanted to build. What he did have was a risk appetite. He wanted to go out and build something of his own, and he was willing to put the hard work in. So he checked all 3 of those boxes. One day on his computer, this was a shared computer for the whole village, he managed to find someone else online in the United States that was also really into shoes, and they started talking. This person said, "Well, gosh, you have a lot of talent. You should really try to start something." And he started coaching him a little bit. Waqas eventually created a company you see in the top left called Marcor. Marcor was the first company in Pakistan's history to get accepted into Y Combinator. The same one that we got rejected from, he got accepted in. And you see the photo on the bottom, it's Waqas and Sidra, they built the company together. That's them at Y Combinator. But it was a huge milestone for Pakistan. It was incredible because Waqas didn't come from a place like HSN or other institutions, he came from a village. And Waqas, and Y Combinator paid for his flight to the United States. So Waqas shows up in the US, he goes to a few of the sessions. And my roommate at that time met Waqas and asked Waqas, where are you staying tonight? And Waqas said, I don't really know. He said, really bata yaar. So my roommate said, why don't you just come to my place? If you have an empty couch, stay with us as long as you need to. And that's where I met Waqas. I came back home from Google one day, there's a guy sleeping on my couch. And I was like, who is this guy? And my roommate says, well, this is Waqas. He's an entrepreneur from Pakistan. He got into Y Combinator, and we want to help him out. Waqas spent a month on my couch. I would come back from Google on days, I would open the front door, and there would be literally shoe boxes all the way to the top. And like, what is happening? Are we a distribution facility now? My roommate said, just wait, it's gonna end up pretty well. Waqas ended up, long story short, Waqas and Sidra together, they pivoted the company from Marco to a company called Adams. Adams is now one of the top sneaker brands in the United States. When you walk around New York City or San Francisco, you see people wearing Adams. When Waqas and Sidra walk around New York City, they're basically local celebrities. People are like, oh, you guys built the Adams shoe. They got featured in a lot of articles. They're just incredible people. But the story here is even more incredible. The fact that they were able to build something out of nothing because they had the conviction in themselves. And they were able to put in a lot of hard work, and they had the risk appetite. So Waqas and Sidra are still good friends. I caught up with Sidra over lunch a few months ago. Company's still doing very well. They sold millions of shoes now. And the shoes are fantastic. You can't see the prices here, but they're not cheap shoes. They go for about $150 to $200 per pair, and people love them. So once again, there's a lot of opportunity. You just have to seize it and invest in yourself. Next, I want to talk to you a little bit about what I like to call making the environment work for you. A lot of future entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs come to me and they say, Faizan, the environment's not perfect for me to create something. I'm waiting for it to be perfect. The environment will never be perfect. You have to make it work for yourself. And I'll share some examples that I thought would be relevant here. The first one, the top left, you see an article from Qarshi University. You see myself and a younger version of myself and 4 other gentlemen with certificates. And this was when we placed first in a national case competition. What people don't realize is that there was no case competition team at Emory when I got there. We literally, a few friends and I went to a librarian one day and said, we should have a case competition team. And they said, okay, we can maybe make that work. So we had to present to them why we need resources, why the school should invest in us and fly us around the country to compete in these things. And the pitch that we gave was that it's an investment in us. We will be able to get jobs at places like Google, our resumes will be better, and it's an investment in the brand of the university when you actually start winning competitions. So we did that, but that was making the environment work for us. And that should be hopefully a takeaway for you as well. Since Qarshi is a relatively new institution, you have a unique advantage to be able to shape the future of what this university would look like. You are the one that can go to your faculty members and tell them that you want the resources to be able to start these kind of competitions. And there's no reason you can't win these competitions just because they weren't in existence before. So that's what we did, and I would hope you would also do that over here. The second article I have here is from the Forbes 30 under 30. So I was lucky to be one of the 4 Pakistanis on the list a few years ago. And it's a huge honor. But what people don't realize there is that it wasn't organic. I actually wanted to be on the list. And one of my friends, his younger brothers, was on the Asia list for Forbes a few years before me. And I asked him, all I said was, can you put in a good word? If I submit my application, there's tens of thousands of applications. Everybody's very talented. Just put in a good word. Just get me the interview. He didn't have the interview power, but at least try. And that's what he did. He put in a good word. And that just gets you through the door for the interviews. Obviously, after the interviews, it's all you. But the point I'm trying to make here is that I made the environment work for me. I knew I found someone. It wasn't even very close of a relation. It was a friend's brother. But I found someone that was able to help put in a good word, and ultimately that is the reason why I got on the list. The third one on the top right that says Entrepreneurship, A Tales of Small Wins, that's an article I wrote for the Wharton magazine. And the reason I put that there is because that was also, in a subtle way, me making the environment work for myself. I wanted more customers for my business. When we first started out, customer acquisition is very expensive in the US. It's hard to go and get customers, to go to conferences, and we wanted to make sure our dollar went far, so we were investing all of our money in building more monitors, not as much in the sales motion. So I figured if I write a good article, and if Wharton publishes the article in their magazine that has distribution nationally, maybe some people will read it and say that's a good idea. I want to show my ads on this cable network. And that's exactly what happened. People started reaching out, we got more publicity, we even got investor interest because of this one article. So once again, making the environment work for yourself in ways that you might not have otherwise expect. The last one is the MD business one. The one I want to share here is, this is a piece you did on me a few years ago, but this magazine in another form didn't exist before. There was another magazine called Qarshi Investors, which was also MD's magazine, and they only accepted juniors and seniors, basically third-year students and fourth-year undergraduate students, to be the writers for the magazine. When I was on campus, I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to basically write for this magazine. I wasn't good at writing, but I still wanted to write it, and I thought people might actually read what I'm saying. So I reached out to them and I said, I know I'm only a freshman, it's my first year, but I think I have some unique insights. At least I personally think I do. I don't know if they're actually unique, but I'd like to write about them. And I still remember, they were just so shocked that a freshman reached out to them. In their first year, they said this person might actually be very interested. So I was able to go and write for the magazine just because I reached out. So the takeaway here is, don't be afraid to reach out. Worst case scenario, they'll say no. But best case scenario might actually help unlock some doors that will pay dividends in the future. On the startup opportunity. So I mentioned before, I get a lot of questions on where do we find this opportunity? How do we know what to build? And the simple answer is there is opportunity all around you. You just have to open your eyes and take a stab at it. Jeff Bezos famously said, so that's the founder of Amazon, one of the largest companies in the US and globally. He famously said, your margin is my opportunity. Very simply what that means is, when you look at companies around you with healthy margins, and these are companies with fairly replicable products, low barriers to entry, you can actually create a similar company, undercut them on price, and you have like a successful business over there. That's basically what Amazon does with Amazon Basics, is what the name of the company. They create similar products and they undercut everybody else on price. So what Bezos is saying here is that if there's a company with really healthy margins, you should start looking into what they're doing. And if you think that there's some opportunity there, it could be worth capitalizing on. One example I want to be shared here is another friend of mine who started a company called Hama. I got this email a few days ago. It just launched, and you see the website down here. And he's a Pakistani friend as well. He works in real estate in the US. And he basically discovered that there's a lot of advantages in Pakistan textile. It's still one of the best businesses. Regardless of all the economic conditions, our cotton is some of the best cotton in the world. Our cotton is exported to most major markets, and we don't really take advantage of it. We're the middlemen, or we're the suppliers, and all the margin is made later on by brands. So we created a brand called Hum, and he's distributing this across the US. And you can't really read the prices on these on the presentation, but this bedding sheet goes for about $400, which is fairly expensive, but it's also very, very high quality cotton. Similar high quality cotton in the US goes for about $1,000 for bed sheets. And we're talking the highest quality in the best possible 5-star hotels, bill sources type of stuff. So he said that there's competitive advantages, which basically means you're good at something that nobody else is good at. That applies to both you, can also apply to your country. So Pakistan's competitive advantage, the way we see it is, there's some advantages in textile, in cotton. So he said, why don't I go back and build something that leverages a competitive advantage? His personal competitive advantage, something that he is uniquely good at that nobody else is, that's how we define that term, was in branding. And he said, what if I create an amazing brand around this? The same way you have Williams-Sonoma and other huge brands in the US, what if you just create a new brand and you distribute it with your right channels, you get some good PR around it, and you can launch it and see what happens. That's exactly what he's doing, and It's too early to tell. He just launched his company a few days ago, but the point still stands here. The point is you should take advantage of the competitive advantages, both that you have and your country/your environment has. So there is startup opportunity all around you. You just have to open your eyes and see what it is and start diving into it. I also wanted to share some lessons from my personal journey of the acquisition in case that's helpful. I put some screenshots here from my Twitter. I have more information on there if anybody's curious, but 3 of the lessons that I learned, I'll read these out to you and I'll explain a little bit more of what that means. First one is faster speed of execution is why you were able to outcompete larger and better resource companies. Most people forget that large companies are inherently slow and inefficient. Our clients love that we could execute a contract in 2 hours instead of 2 weeks. Time is of the essence in the business world. That's one of the main attributes that every single industry cares about. If all you do is create a company that offers a similar product but you're significantly faster than the bigger ones, that alone is a huge opportunity for you. So that's just one lesson that I learned, that if you can be faster than everybody else in your execution, you will start getting traction. The second is, unlike large companies, startups have the unique luxury to break rules without facing much scrutiny. Rideshare ads were illegal in New York City when we started, but that didn't stop us from scaling. The reward was greater than the risk. Lyft's acquisition of Halo was a de-risk entry into this regulated space. Large companies, regardless of where you are, it could be Pakistan, the US, when large companies make any kind of a move, everybody's looking at them. They always have the spotlight. So when we started rideshare advertising, which basically is what we were doing, we were putting monitors on the roof of cars, that was not legal in some markets. If a large company like Uber or Lyft did that, they would get caught in a day. People would be all over them, they would get fined. But if a small startup does it, nobody really cares. There's a lot of appetite for people just to let these small companies do whatever they want. So you have this unique luxury to be able to break the rules without facing a lot of scrutiny. So don't be afraid to take a risk in that department either. Generally speaking, it works out. Lastly, founder-led sales is better than hiring sales veterans. Even after our acquisition, 80% of our sales came from one-on-one deals that I had with clients. Every single trip was worth it, but 10% of the time my deal didn't close, I walked away with incredible product feedback and tangible insights. If some of you in this room do decide to build your businesses, one of the biggest lessons that I learned that I hope you will also take away is do not outsource your sales from the first day. You need to be able to know what your customer wants. You need to be able to know how your customer reacts and collect that feedback. And nobody will be as passionate as you. So you have to be the one driving the force on the sales motion as well. And for you to learn how to actually make future product iterations work. So for my closing remarks, I want to leave you with 4 main things. If you get nothing else from the presentation, hopefully these 4 points will be ones that you can take away from today. First is, you have to train yourself to accept strategic risks. It does not have to be unlimited risks. It's basically small risks that you're taking to be able to test ideas out, and then you double down on them once you get some traction. Second is, pursue your entrepreneurial endeavors with relentless conviction. I use the term relentless deliberately. That's a term that Amazon's Jeff Bezos uses a lot, and that's how you built Amazon into what it is today. You have to be your biggest advocate. If you don't have faith in yourself, nobody will have faith in you. Third is work hard, but also have fun in the process, which is also very important. So your job is not to, ironically, create another job for yourself. If all you do by starting a company is you're just kind of grinding away and you're not having fun, that is not a win. Then you'll get burnt out pretty quickly. You have to like what you do. So when you're looking into what you want to start, think about your passions and think about what you would actually like to do and spend time doing. Because it is hard work at the end of the day, but you want to make sure that you're having fun with it. The last one is utilize every resource around you to scale your business. And that one applies to you particularly because you are on a university campus. I can't stress that enough. You have so many resources around you. You have incredible faculty, you have incredible peers. You can actually use them to be able to start something or at least try something and see if it works or not. With that, I'll end my presentation. Thank you so much for your attention and for the time.